error myself sometimes. So, okay. All right, so hopefully you've heard us talk in some previous webinars about Build, Learn, Grow, and so wanted to just give you a few updates about that. So one is the emergency relief grants that we've been providing to those of you who have children in the CCDF subsidy program. We've been doing that for quite some time now and are excited, about that additional support. We've spent about $10.3 million in that relief grant effort to date. We've spent almost $2 million on the equipment and supplies using your Build, Learn, Grow allowance with Fastenal. And I would just say if you're on and if you can make sure you're muted, that would be super helpful. We also have used about $360,000 of the funding to help pay for the background check fees. So as you've been hiring staff and doing fingerprinting. And then we have provided about $1.8 million in the new hire and onboarding stipend, which is really exciting. Hopefully that means that you are doing some hiring and that process is going well for you. We've also done about $3 million in our support of the CACFP program. So hopefully you've seen some increased reimbursement as you've been receiving that from the Department of Education. And then when we think about the support to children and families, we've paid the copays for families in the subsidy program. We've spent about $2.9 million on that effort so far. And then our Build, Learn, Grow scholarship program, which hopefully you all are participating in, but if you're not and have questions about that, certainly please reach out to Renee and I so we can help you. We're serving about 5,600 children to date and have room to serve lots and lots more. So again, if you're not engaged in that effort with us, please let us know how we can help you. We have had about 1,600 Hoosiers who've applied for the Child Care Development Fund under that category of job search. So you might recall from our previous webinars that we've added the opportunity for families to receive subsidy if they are searching for work. We know sometimes that the barrier to employment is the fact that you don't have childcare. And so really excited to see people taking advantage of that. And then starting this week into next week, we have been partnering with Ivy Tech and they will be launching a program for their students who are enrolled in Ivy Tech to be a priority to come into the subsidy program. And then some of our statewide supports, we've seen about a 5% increase in those of you who are reporting your enrollment to us in terms of filling seats. And so for those of you that have done that, what used to be biweekly and we've moved to monthly enrollment reporting, thank you so much for taking time to do that. That information is hugely valuable to us. It's also how we're making decisions about what other financial investments to make. So those of you who are not reporting, unfortunately, at some point you might lose out on some funding opportunities because it's really the way that we're able to see where need is, where there's not enough seats, how we need to invest some future funding. So if you've not done that, please do that. We really would appreciate it and certainly believe it will help you in the long run. We also have about 700 providers who completed the Fundamentals for Business Sustainability training. So those of you who did that, thank you so much. As you may recall, we've asked that you do this as a part of all of the ways that we're giving you additional funding to start you to think about your business models and how we might help you improve those. And then really excited to partner with Early Learning Indiana to launch our new online childcare marketplace this fall. And so keep an eye on your text and emails and all of those things as we'll be giving you some more information to come. Okay, so a couple of important updates for you. One is the emergency relief grant. So that extra 20% that you're receiving in subsidy, we are really excited to be able to extend that through March 30th of 2022. And that's when you would get that final payment with that increased subsidy amount there. So hopefully you're able to use that to invest in your workforce, some other programmatic needs that you have. And we're excited that our funding is holding enough that we are able to extend that. Alongside that, we'll also extend those copays that we're doing for families. So that same time frame. And so we'll communicate that to families as well, but please make sure you're doing that too so that they know they have some additional time that they don't need to pay that to you, that we'll pay it on their behalf. The equipment and supply allowance that we did through Fastenal, it has closed. However, hopefully you took advantage of that. If you didn't, that's totally okay. We will have some other opportunities to do that moving forward. So today we're really going to spend most of our time talking about the American Rescue Plan. And when Congress appropriated that funding to states, they did so in three kind of buckets. So the first one are the child care stabilization grants. And that's money that really was provided for us to give you as providers a stipend or a grant as such, so that you can help pay for either expenses you've already had or future expenses. That funding that we will give to you has to be based upon cost, so it won't be based on normal reimbursement models. And we're excited that really we think we're just maybe a month or so away from being able to do that. We have a group of providers who have lovingly agreed to test the site that we're building for us, and they're going to do that for us next week and then allow us to make some changes, and then we'll continue to communicate to you when we're ready for you all to come and apply for those funds. But really excited about the opportunity to provide that to you. The second bucket, which is where we're going to focus most of our time today, is the CCDF discretionary funding. And these are really fairly flexible funds. They're intended to be used in conjunction with those stabilization grants to really strengthen the broader childcare system. And so there are a few things that we'll go over today that the funds can and can't be spent on, just so you have some context of that. But really, we're hoping today to get feedback about the best way to use that funding. And then the third bucket is this mandatory and matching funds that we get for the Child Care Development Fund. And these are funds that can be used for general program support, including access to child care vouchers. These funds come to states typically in a way by which, if there's $1 of a federal fund, you have to have $1 in a state fund in order to be able to use it. So what's great is that this is a continual increase as long as we have enough state funds to match that. These first 2 years, Congress said that states didn't have to have those matching funds, so we're really excited about that. But after that time, we will have to go and try to make sure we have enough state money to continue to draw down that extra funding. So the discretionary funds can be used to rebuild kind of towards a stronger system that accomplishes several things. So one is making sure that parents have equal access to high quality childcare. The second is supporting the developmental and learning needs of children. We know that certainly some of our kids didn't have great access to care and education in the last year, and so they might be a little bit behind, so we need to think about how to support them in that. We want to also meet parents' employment needs and childcare preferences. So thinking about our families who work night shifts, who work on the weekends, how do we make sure we have options to support them as well? How do we appropriately compensate an essential and skilled workforce? And then how to facilitate a robust childcare industry? So how do we think about sustainability and all the things that we're doing? So some examples that the Federal Office of Child Care gives as allowable funds, uses of those funds, are things like continued child care assistance for essential workers. So the effort that we're doing right now as it relates to Build, Learn, Grow scholarships, we would have the opportunity, if that's something that as a group we feel is important, we could continue that. Expanding access to high quality care by improving payment practices and building supply for underserved children. So for example, payment practices are things like paying on attendance versus paying on enrollment, or how we might want to think about that differently in the future. And then for our underserved children, we're thinking about children who maybe are English language learners, children with disabilities, even our infants and toddlers, and how might we think about building the supply for certain populations. The third is about increasing access to child care assistance by investing in tools that help family find care, and then expanding eligibility criteria. So things like, what should the income guidelines look like? Should we want to expand those? How could we do that? And then lastly, investing in mental health supports for children, families, and care providers. And we certainly know that everyone has been through a lot in the last 18 to 20 months. And so thinking about how we support everyone's mental health and well-being is a really important strategy. So for the listening session today, what we'd like to do is really think about forward-looking opportunities for our childcare system. So I assume that some of you may have questions and concerns about just normal operating practices, things like vouchers that maybe didn't get reauthorized or problems you're having. Renee and I definitely want to hear those concerns, but we're going to ask that maybe you send those to us at the provider inquiry mailbox or at my email there down in the last bullet. So that today we can really think about how to focus on the investments that we need to make with this funding. But we do want to hear you if you're having difficulty, so please reach out to us so that we can have a conversation about that. You can give us some input today in a couple ways. So one is, if you know how to use the raise your hand function, you definitely can do that. That's a great way, and Renee will help me keep an eye on anyone who's raising their hand. And then we are going to go through some questions, and it would be really great if you would type some answers into the chat. And then as we look at those, we might also call on you to expand upon that if that's okay, because sometimes you may say something that we think is really important, but would like to hear your thoughts a little more about that. We'll ask that you try not to talk over people, but sometimes in these Zoom meetings that's hard, so no hard feelings if that happens. And then if you don't have a chance to speak up today and you really wanted to, feel free to give me an email, and then I can schedule a time to call you, or we can, chat via email, however that is most convenient for you. But I know sometimes big group meetings are a little bit hard, so if you don't get a chance to share today, please let me know that. Okay, so we're going to start with this question, and I think you can still see the questions, right? Renee, I don't know if you're on, if you can verbally tell me yes.
Yes, you can see them.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the first question is, as a child care provider, how have your program's needs changed in recent months? And how is current funding meeting or not meeting those evolving needs? That would be really helpful for us to know, just because, again, we understand that your needs have likely changed with the market and would really like to understand what that looks like. So I'm going to pull up the chat a little bit here, and Renee's going to help me make sure we're good there. But yeah, if you wanted to just type in anything in the chat in terms of how things have changed for you, we'd really love to know too things about the extra CCF reimbursement. Has that helped? Has it not been enough? Those kinds of things would be super helpful for us to understand as we move forward. So I see that there was a comment in there that you've recently raised your hourly wages in order to retain and attract staff. However, we haven't raised our rates, so it's a little bit of a struggle to pay higher wages. Yeah, I know that that's always a balance, right? Which is you want families to be able to afford to come to you, but also understanding sometimes you need more revenue in order to pay them higher wages. Jacqueline has commented about the extra reimbursement has been good since food prices have gone up. Yes, well, I'm so glad to hear that. We know that that has happened even for those of us just in your regular life. Yeah, so Jacqueline, if you're speaking about CACFP, it will continue for a while and then we'll reevaluate, but definitely we think that's such a valuable partnership with them. We would like to continue to expand that if at all possible.
Nicole, there was a comment by Melody. If you haven't seen it, she says, we have increased our budget for wages and supplies. Both of these items have been necessary to provide the highest quality. So that may be something you want her to expand upon.
Yeah, Melody, would you be willing to unmute and say more about that?
Sure, I can talk about that.
Great.
So one thing is definitely hiring higher quality teachers, which is costing more now just because of the environment that we live in. I mean, a lot of our teachers can make more working at Dairy Queen if they want to be full-time. So we've really increased what we're paying our staff. And then also just the cost of supplies. Hair nets are crazy right now. The cost of those. Gloves have been another thing. There, if you can find them, they're super expensive. So just, adding so much more to our budget to make sure we're providing everything we need.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's super helpful. So do you mind if I ask, because I think we're trying to evaluate some of the things we've done, like were they helpful and maybe they weren't. So like with the allowance with Fastenal, certainly gloves were on there, but did you find that helpful or was that not the best way to support you in that?
So I'm glad you brought that up, just because we did purchase gloves through the Fastenal. And I thought I was paying for like 6 cases of gloves because the amount was significant. And what we ended up getting were 6 boxes of gloves. And so the cost per box of gloves was what I would have normally paid for a case of gloves on Amazon.
Okay, that's super helpful. Okay.
The other pieces of the Fastenal, I felt like that was beneficial, but like the gloves, I wished I would have spent our money that way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. That is super, super good. Okay. There was someone else. Oh, Jocelyn, you had mentioned about the paperwork and staying on top of everyone's payment is taking so much more time. Would you be willing to unmute and expand upon that a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, thank you.
I just found I love the Build, Grow, Learn scholarship for the parents. However, it was really hard to stay on top of everyone that applied for it and see if they got paid and what they had paid. One Saturday, I spent probably 5 or 6 hours on 3 kids trying to figure out what they still owed and what they, what they didn't know or what had been paid for and all that. It's just a lot of time.
Yeah.
Making sure that everybody is caught up and current and equal with everybody else and all that kind of stuff. And I like I said, I love it for the parents. I think it kind of is not beneficial to us. I was going to get the same amount of pay whether you helped them or you didn't, but I had to do a whole lot of work. I had to do the training. I had to do all the paperwork. I had a problem with the Payoneer.
Yes.
That took almost 6 hours one day on the phone to try to get it rectified.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I do understand your perspective about you were going to get the same amount of funding regardless. So I think our hope was, one, that it provided some relief for families and maybe a recruiting tool for you if you needed it. But the second was because we were doing it in that more kind of upfront payment, that if you needed to open up new classrooms or expand your programming options, that it might give you funding to do that. Are you willing to share, like, is it doing that for you, or is it not really accomplishing those goals?
Well, I'm an in-home, so, I'm limited to 12 no matter how many,
Sure. Yeah.
So, and I'm never not full.
Okay. Well, that's good to know then. Yeah. So then for you, that's not really the draw, right? Like that would not be the piece that helps you.
Exactly. It just wasn't, I mean, again, I provided it for my families because I think it is a valuable service to them. However, for me, it was a lot of work it just took up my Saturdays.
Yeah. Well, that is so super helpful. I can't thank you enough for explaining that so that Renee and I have a better understanding, because we certainly want it to be effective for families for sure, but want it to be effective for you too. So that is really helpful. Thank you.
Well, I think the extension was a whole lot easier to file than the beginning part. I understand why you have to have that all. I get it, It just took up my time.
Yeah, and some of it, to be honest and fair to our partners at ELI and IAN, were some lessons learned from the first round of you all submitting claims. And I think we learned from that, okay, we could make this easier, which is why we did some simplifications for the second round. But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, certainly don't want to make it difficult on you. That's not the goal. Yeah. And I see. Oh yeah, go ahead, Renee.
I was just going to tell you one last one. You might want to just make a comment on Lynn Waldo. She said the 20% has been very helpful, but it would be great to be paid based on enrollment. And then she had a little bit afterwards. I didn't know if you want to make a comment on that.
No, Lynn, would you like to expand upon that at all?
I can, sure.
Thanks.
I was just, I am not in a center. I actually help the centers I support them with their subsidy business. But I just know we see a lot of, even though we get the 20%, sometimes we're only getting 20% on half,
right?
Because the parents have real difficulty. We, so far up to this point, have been meeting the parents at the door, taking the kids in so the parents don't come in. So then swiping becomes very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And so coming in to swipe a personal day and we can add it, but then the parents having to go and approve it and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So just definitely being paid based on enrollment would help get that steady income coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So super helpful feedback. I would be curious. I have been hearing from some providers that they are really experiencing, kids and families sign up and they're like, say, due to come in first day on Monday and they never show. Do you know if they're experiencing that where you are?
I don't. Somebody from a center, I think I know Vicky's on here, the DL district leader from Kinder Care, so she might be able to say if we've been seeing a lot of that. We don't usually hear about the kids until they do actually start. So
yes, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And we've done a couple of what we would call peer-to-peers, where you get to meet with other states who do payment based on enrollment, not attendance, so that we can learn a little bit about some of the mechanisms they have in place. And I definitely think it's something for us to explore, because I do understand chasing that payment is a lot of time and effort for you and for families, to be fair to them. So super helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so question 2. Pre and post pandemic, we know that many providers have cited that the demand for childcare in their communities is changing. Can you tell us what that looks like in your community a little bit, and what impacts you see for you as a business operator? And I'll just say, from our other 2 sessions today, it's very interesting. We have some places who are like, yes, I am super full, I have big wait lists, and other providers who are saying, no, I still have been unable to get seats back and have families come in. And so again, I think if you're willing to share that with us, that would be super helpful. And then just understanding, how that's impacting your operations, whether you have a big wait list or you don't, that would be really, really helpful. Yeah, Lisa's talking about infant care being almost non-existent. We are really seeing that, Lisa, in that enrollment reporting that you all are so kindly giving to us, because we're able to see that by age group. And we certainly had a lack of infant care before, but that really does seem to have been exacerbated by COVID for sure. Having enough staff to reopen your classrooms. We did hear that a lot today. Earlier as well, that it seems like you have capacity and more kids who want to be served, but the staffing shortage is maybe what's holding you up. So this is really helpful, those of you who are saying that you are full and have wait lists, because I'm not sure that's always the perception of what's happening. And so that's really helpful to know. Yeah.
Nicole, Lisa Kimmerman says she seems to be getting less calls since COVID for her older age group.
That's interesting. I don't know if you would feel comfortable unmuting, but sharing if you have any kind of thoughts as to why that might be happening. And it's okay if you don't want to, by the way. I totally get not everybody wants to talk. Melody, would you want to share any more about how kind of you're approaching? It looks like you're currently closing one room, but going to create an infant space. Would you be willing to share about that?
Yeah, I can talk to that. So I kind of understand what she's talking about with less preschool kids. I just feel like that is kind of a gap for us too. And we noticed that a lot of our families are really wanting the infants 1s and 2s. We don't currently serve infants. And so we're trying to transition some of our classrooms to kind of meet the younger needs that our families have. And so as we're transitioning some of the kids, especially during this fall season, we're trying to create an infant room so that we can start serving families, because a lot of our families will leave to find infant care and then pull their other children as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
And we don't have any other empty space to just create a separate infant room.
Yeah. Thank you. That is really, really helpful. Teresa, I noticed your comment was that you'd like to hire, you just can't afford it at the present time. Do you have any sense of what it might take for you to be able to afford it if you were going to be able to hire? Or if you're willing to share that, and if not, that's okay. I know that's kind of a deep business question.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Well, I've only been open a year, and as a in-home childcare and day school, I've been getting quite a few calls for various ages. And a lot of parents like the continuity of care and the small group. My thing is that it is out of my home, and my care is just as good as that of a center. They do get introduced to different concepts, but it feels like home, but they get taught like they're in school. So there's advantages to that. My thing is the price, how much I charge per child, and then the hours needed. I was working the numbers over with my husband, and we just can't afford it. And just starting up, it's tough within itself. And so we realized that the first, 2 or 3 years, maybe 5, a lot of the income that we make has to go right back into our business.
Sure.
And then you're providing, you want to provide nutritious meals and activities. And so it's just like, where's the extra money? We don't have, and even with I've heard about the additional help that you get with the helping to hire someone on, but then there's no help once you get them on. You have to still pay them throughout the year. So that's not workable for us. And I just feel as a in-home childcare provider, and work and new and trying to look at the numbers and working the numbers, it's just not feasible at the time. Then the pandemic hit us really hard. So we had to wait to open. There's just a lot of things that come into play that I don't have time to go over here.
No,
but I love the fact that they're looking at the in-home childcare, because whether you go to a center or whether it's in the house, we all are needed. We all are important. Right.
That's
and so
right.
It's just what you need. So what is the parent more comfortable with? So it's not, well, you have to go to a center, you have to go to the home. If they're both quality, then they're both essential. And so if you have good quality childcare, whether it's in a center or a home, we both should be privy to the same kinds of grants and everything. But within the home, it needs to be thought about differently, because I've worked in the classroom. And when you're in a home and you're doing it all by yourself, you're providing nutritious meals and snacks, then you're potty training, you're changing diapers, and you're providing activities. Oh, that's a whole lot. And so I was like, but I love it. I love the fact that I could do this out of my home. I'm opening up my home. And then there's the cleaning. So you're looking at all that, and I could sure use some help, but then you can't afford the help. And so I have to keep my numbers down. If I could have 12, but I'm like, Teresa, you can't handle 12. You can handle maybe 1 infant and 5 preschoolers. That's it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do very much.
I can handle that number, and I can still interact with them, teach them, play with them, and provide the nutritious meals. But I just feel, and then the 20% for me, I have one person that receives the fund. It's what I have to pay for the food that I purchase for my babies that are with me. They're mine when they're with me. So I know I feel that, it really doesn't help. And so what I've done is I just tack that on to the co-payment that you guys are doing for my parent. And so that way she has less, because my fee is more than what state actually pays. And so that way she only has just like $17 to pay a week. And so that's my gift, like, to her.
Yeah, that's awesome.
As a family child care provider, I don't know, and I can't speak for anybody else, but it's a lot. And to try to get them outside to play and everything, it's a lot, but it's worth it. And I'm not like complaining or trying to or anything, but I'm just like, and the paperwork, the additional paperwork, and then having to check when they check in and they check out. I just found out that my parent checked in and then she checked out. Something was going on with their child. And so it's the whole thing of having to do that and then go in and then make sure, well, we have to correct that. I'm waiting on someone to call me back. And so when you're in a home and you already have a lot to do, but you want to participate in the program because it is beneficial to the customers that you serve in the community, you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, this is something else. You know, you want to do what's right for your customers, but then you want to keep your sanity.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Jacqueline or Teresa, thank you so much. This is super helpful. And I do think you've made really important points for Renee and I to contemplate as we're thinking about some of future initiatives. You know, how might we, or how do we need to adjust those to be different for you as a home provider versus others who are in center-based care? And so I think that's, again, really appreciate you sharing that, because that gives us a lot of good content to go on there.
Yeah, because a lot of people really don't. If you have not worked in the center, and you have not, and you really don't know the contrast, and there is a huge difference because you don't have all that help, and you don't have grant writers, and you don't have substitutes coming in. So it's just like, okay, you want to make sure that you can make a difference in your little corner at joining the providers all around the world and in this nation, in and throughout the communities. You want to be a part of that group that's providing good care.
That's right.
And so I'm providing good care out of my home. But I'm like, with all these different grants and stuff, and you have to sit down and there's a lot of additional paperwork. It's just like, it becomes like overwhelming. And then you're trying to go to school. You want to engage with your family, with your grandchildren and everything. And then you have to say, Lord, give me strength. Because, you know, I need to make a difference, not only for the children that I'm servicing in my community. I need some energy so I can be there to love on my grandbabies too. And so that my grandbabies know that I love, and the parents love that I love their babies like I love my babies. I feed their babies like I feed my babies. If I won't feed it to, they eat what we eat.
That's right.
And so if I'm not going to eat it and I don't feed it to my grandchildren, your baby's not going to get it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying, with the way I feed my babies, and it comes into question, where are a lot of people shopping? Because when you're in a home, you can't buy bulk. I can't buy a lot of bulk like centers can. And so that subsidy really doesn't help a home, because you don't have the luxury of buying the bulk to see the difference.
Sure.
And then with the Fastenal, I thank God for that. But then when I went to order, I couldn't order bleach. I couldn't order gloves and this. I was like, well, okay, I guess I'll try some of these new floor cleaners. Mm-hmm. I ordered what I could order, but the things that I really needed, they were not available anymore.
I see.
So I'm thinking, okay.
Yeah. So again, that's super helpful, because then I think as Renee and I work with our team to strategize about future pieces, I've heard you say a couple important things. One is we still need to keep a really good mindfulness about the way we're asking you all to apply for things. How do we minimize paperwork, minimize burden, making sure that we're being really thoughtful about that.
Because we don't have secretaries or administrators.
Right. Yeah, no, totally understand.
They have someone that's designated for that, because that's a job within itself. And so when it's one, most of the time in home child care, it's just one person. And so if they're doing their best to provide the social, emotional, the physical, the cognitive, and the linguistical aspects of rearing that child and making sure that they're getting what they need to get while their parents is at work, at the end of the day, okay, you're mustering up some more energy to try to look over these grants. And you're I can't speak for anybody else, but I'm sitting at the computer wanting to sleep. Yes. And I'm thinking, and so I'm thinking there has to be like a better way. And like I said, you can't compare the two, because centers are wonderful. Centers are wonderful, but so are homes. But we don't have that administrative help. We don't have that. Yes. We don't have that. And we don't have anybody that's going out and buying supplies for us and then delivering supplies. And then we don't have storage. you
Yeah.
know? So I'm thinking.
So, I mean, points really well taken, Teresa. And again, I super appreciate you sharing that, because I think those are all really important things for us to keep a mindfulness of as we move forward. I would be interested for all of you. I think I put the third question up here about the fact that, so we know that you're really struggling in terms of, you know, recruiting and retaining qualified staff. And, you know, we're trying to be thoughtful about the various interventions that states are using, and have listed several of those for you there. I would be curious to know, and feel free to type it in the chat, but you know, of these, if there are ones that you feel are really important and why, because I think they're all important. So let me be clear. I don't think there's one on that list that are not important, but we will have to be thoughtful about, you know, which ones we think are really important, what we do first, second, third, those kinds of things. And we'd really love to see your thoughts on that. Renee, I don't know if people have put chat comments in already that maybe I've missed.
Not yet. Well, we got one that said C.
C,
but I
okay.
think people probably still typing.
So staffing resources between programs, and that definitely is something that I think our state can benefit from, is some of what typically you hear about as shared services. So if I even think back to Teresa's comments around just some of the kind of burden of paperwork, you know, if we could cultivate some childcare home networks where you're able to share some of the workload of that, you know, what might that do for you as small business owners? You know, if you could come together and share things like benefit packages for your staff and reduce the cost, you know, might that be something that would work for you? And so, Lisa, I see, you know, your comment about being a home who works by yourself, that might be helpful. And we're really exploring states that have really strong childcare network, childcare home networks, because I do think there's value in us thinking about how might we explore that, so that we have to, you know, work to see how we can get you all together. And I'm sorry to see that you're sick and closing. That is terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that.
We have a lot that have chosen D.
D. Yes, I think that D is going to have to be a strategy, right? The funding we've received from Congress is one-time money. Oh, good, you're not sick. I'm glad I misunderstood your previous comment, Lisa. But because the funding we received is one-time funding, you know, we want to be really cautious about how we use it. And so I do think D, in terms of how do we help people think about their program expenses and shifting some of those costs that you currently have so that you can shift those towards teachers' salary, is going to be really, really important.
We have Brina Jackson, who actually chose A. She was one of the few that said A.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think that's great. So, I mean, I do wonder a lot sometimes about if we could find synergy for all of you in the way that we market for the field. I know that right now most of you are doing that independent of one another, and it's expensive and all of those things. And so I do think that there are some states doing some really innovative things around how to bring you together to share resources in that way, for the state to possibly share some of the expenses. I think that that's really great. Let's see. I see lots of D's in the sub pool. And so we're still working on the sub pool. Indiana AUIC is working really, really hard, and that is still coming. So we'll be excited to roll that out as the weeks progress. Okay, I want to be sensitive to your time here, so I'm going to move to question 4. And I assume that we all believe every family deserves access to high quality care. I certainly know that all of you believe that. It's what you do every day. So whether you are currently participating in PASA quality or not, I'd love to know what your biggest barriers are that you're facing in meeting or maintaining high quality program standards. And so I would assume that some of that is staffing related, but would definitely love to hear if there are things beyond staffing, or if I'm correct that staffing is a part of that, but would love to know what some of those barriers are that you think are really there in terms of providing high quality care. I know that can be a bit of a complicated question. Yeah, so here's some things about staff. Some of you not having just enough time, perhaps, to do the accreditation work because of all the other additional things you've had to do. I think that is just so very valid. Absolutely. We know we've asked a lot of you in the last several months in terms of just extra health and safety precautions and things that you're doing every single day. So.
Brina Jackson had put language.
Oh, would you care to unmute and tell us more about that? That would be really helpful.
Okay, yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Cabrina. So language barrier is I have a staff now. She's from another country, Haiti, and she speaks French. So she has nothing in French that she can read. When she does the training, I have to sit right there with her to do the training, to give it to her in English, as she's still learning English. So everything is in English or Spanish. There's no other language.
Gosh, you know what? That's a really excellent point. And it's something that I think we automatically go to, yes, we need to have things in Spanish, but I am certain we could do a better job about other languages. So thank you. That's really helpful.
I'm sorry, you froze up. I didn't hear you.
Oh, I just said that's really helpful. I don't think we always do a great job of thinking about languages other than Spanish. And I'm not sure that we do a good job of that. So thank you. That's really helpful information.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next one just because, again, I want to be sensitive to your time because I'm going to guess you have hopefully things you want to go do this evening. So this one is kind of our big open-ended, if you could fix or change or reimagine anything about how our childcare system works today, what would it be and why? This is our opportunity that I think, you know, this field has probably never had to have this much influx of money. And so I want us to be kind of bold and creative in how we think about utilizing these funds, and would love to say, or love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's see here. Yeah, so I think some of the comments so far in this section are really about, I think maybe the previous question, but again, I'd love to hear anything that you all have as kind of your wish list of, or as I say in the office, my Barbie dream world of what things might look like someday. But
Nicole Hill put in Ohio, staff are given yearly 1 years in the field. This encourages staff to stay in the field.
I think that's excellent. Yeah, that's a really good, and I don't know if Ohio is doing a tax-based credit or if they're just doing that from their office, but I certainly could look into that about Ohio. There are states who are doing some tax incentives for folks who work in childcare, and I think that there's some really innovative approaches for us to think about and learn from, because at least that doesn't go away, right? I mean, that intervention to me is a really sound one because it could be there for the course of eternity if we put those into our tax laws here in Indiana. And so I definitely think those are things for us to explore as a group.
Yeah. Stephanie Tudor had mentioned something that was mentioned in our earlier listening sessions where she said hiring requirements, and she is also mentioning the age for infant toddler care.
Yeah, so thank you so much for raising that. I know Renee and I were a little surprised about how many people raised that in the last session about wanting to see if there's a possibility of allowing younger caregivers for infants and toddlers. So I think that's really important. My understanding is that's been our regulations for a really long time. I don't know that we've re-looked at that. So I think that that's an excellent point. Oh, yes. So I agree that the push for school readiness is really big, but wanting to lose that emphasis on the importance of play, being child-centered. Yeah, totally agree with you. I think all of us on this call have the opportunity to help educate our legislators and policymakers about early childhood being a little bit different sometimes than some parts of the other educational system, and that play is such an important part of how kids are learning. And how do we focus on that? So yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, here's one real in our Barbie world. Lynn Waldo said, update the POS system to an app that parents and providers can access.
So thank you so much. That's really interesting. We went and looked for new technology a couple of years ago, and there was some. The challenge was all of it required internet. And at that time, we had concerns about parts of our state that still just had almost no internet access, but I do know that that has gotten better. And so we will definitely be going back to the market to see what our innovators and technology have come up with. But yeah, I think that's really excellent. So I think I see the comment about tax incentives might be difficult for teachers to see the immediate benefit. Yeah, you're right. That is a long-term investment strategy. And so, yeah, whether or not it would help in the immediate, I think that's a really good point for us to give some thoughts on. Yeah. Oh, Melody, I certainly agree with your comment about the fact that you are essential workers. And that your hope is for us to continue to lift that up. Yeah, I agree. I think probably other good things have come from COVID, but I do think one of the best things that have come from the pandemic is the recognition about how important childcare and early education is. And I think that that is amazing. And we have a good opportunity to build upon that as we move forward. I certainly think it's an exciting time in that way. So I see the comment about the CDA. And so we do that now through Teach, but I would love to know if you have a thought about like another mechanism. If there's some other suggestion you might have other than Teach to get folks access to that. CPR and first aid. Yeah, we hear that a lot. And I think that that's really important for us to contemplate as we're thinking about how do we maybe take on some costs for things so that you can shift that cost into your teacher's salary. That's a really great one. Yeah, Nicole, I see your comment. We still have, I know, some CCRNRs who are willing to do that and others who are not. And so I recognize that that's been a bit of a difficult change. Oh, Heather's talking about online CDA programs. Yeah. Oh, Allison says, Renee, you were a part of United Way.
Yes, I was.
It's the either benefit or downside of Renee being in the system for such a long time. Yeah. These are excellent comments. So I think these are really interesting because they tie to some of the earlier questions we had about, how do we address the challenge of workforce? And I would be curious to know, for those of you who feel like, access to these CDA programs are really important, if you feel like your staff right now have the kind of mental energy and capacity to go and do that. I would say on earlier sessions today, we heard a lot from providers who said, gosh, I just don't know if my staff kind of have it in them right now to do that. And I don't know if you feel like you're experiencing that as well or not, but would love to hear if that's something that you are feeling from your teams, is just, going back into higher ed or spending time in the evening studying is maybe just not something they've got the capacity to do right now. Oh, okay. So Renee's her assignment for tomorrow is to tell me more about her time at United Way with the CDA program.
So we can chat tomorrow.
Okay, good. I'd love to know more about that. So Teresa, your comment about quality childcare for U.S. citizens, certainly there are still some bills working their way through Congress that may definitely open up access to early learning. I do think that Congress's thought about the child care tax credit that families are getting now was to help open up access, and hopefully your families, I think they may have only gotten one payment to date, but hopefully that may be something that also gives them some relief, and then that relief gets passed on to you. But I think time will tell about that intervention and whether or not that's successful. Yeah. So it's good to hear some of you are saying you do still have staff interested in their CDA and associate's degrees. So that's awesome. I think that's really good to hear. I recognize how stressful the last couple of years have been for your teachers and for those of you in homes and all of those things. And so totally would understand if people are feeling like this is maybe not the best time to return to higher ed. And so I think if that is the case, then we want to think about what are some other ways that we get you support that still help build skills and lead towards a credential until, you know, people are maybe more ready to do that. But, well, I cannot thank you all enough for your time today. You are always such a great group to give us feedback. This will not be the last time that we're coming to you. So really the purpose of today's listening sessions were to help us start to solidify what some planning might look like. And then once we have that, we'll come back to you to say, hey, here's what we're thinking. Tell us where we have this right. Tell us where we have it wrong, so that we know that we're meeting the needs of the families you're supporting and as you as small business owners. So you know, we want to continue to hear from you. So, you know, I've put up there our inquiry mailbox. Renee and I check that. Renee checks it more than me, so I want to be totally fair to her. She's really good about doing that. But, you know, that is a great way to get in touch with us. But we do want to keep hearing from you. The way that we're going to make the best decisions is by you giving us your input. You are certainly living it every day. Again, really appreciate your time on a 6 o'clock on what looks like a beautiful evening, at least here in Indianapolis. And I know that there's lots of great things to do. And so I really, really appreciate you giving us some time. Again, if you have other pieces you want to share, please reach out to us. And then again, look for your text and emails, because the next thing you're going to hear from us are about those stabilization payments, and you're not going to want to miss those. That's going to be really important. And then we'll continue to come back to you with what planning looks like. So again, thank you so much. Have a great evening. Please keep up the great work. And again, thank you for everything you're doing in our state every single day. Thanks so much. You guys have a great rest of your evening.
Have a good evening, everyone.